Hello and welcome to the NeuroTechSF Hack Night for November 18, 2021. Thank you for joining us. And we've got a cool evening with a lot of good information, news, all kinds of stuff. Some great discussions that have been cropping up on Slack. It really looks like there's a lot of people getting into BCI. Data and all the and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and hopefully it'll be a good one. So, oh yes, and Morgan has joined us. Let me invite him on screen. So I'll start with the really boring news as it relates to everyone else while Morgan is joining, which is I finally picked up a Quest 2. So that was pretty cool. I got to see the onboarding process. Hey, Morgan.
Hello.
Hey, I'm just boring the captive audience with my story of purchasing a Quest 2.
Quest 2. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the Facebook VR. Yep. And so pretty nice, works great. If you're wondering whether you have to wear your glasses, yes, people already knew this, but
Yeah. Meta.
Yes. Well, what if I don't recognize the legitimacy of that name change? But yes, the VR experience is great. I will tell you that what I wasn't expecting is it's roughly an hour from start to finish before you can actually use it and like mess around and whatever. So the tutorials are pretty lengthy. You know, you have to set up your safe zone. You have to set up the seated areas. You have to set up a bunch of other stuff. You have to link every account you've ever made.
You should have a room set aside.
Well, you know, I was going to use it seated. So my thing was like, look, I'm sitting. I'm not going to hurt myself, but I'd like to jump into YouTube to see what this is. And it took a good hour before I got a chance to jump into YouTube. But then I did. And I can tell you that VR videos are a lot more enjoyable than regular ones when watching them in VR.
I'm going to just ping a couple of people. See if
yeah. Yeah, I imagine Facebook is not happy about it, but it's weird. What was it? There was that hoax about IHOP changing their name for April Fools, and like, you know, there were a bunch of articles, and then it turned out that they weren't doing that or whatever. But I'm always like, to what extent do we have to participate in this chicanery? But that's my old man yells at cloud moment of the day. So in addition to the VR stuff, let's see, I can tell you that we've been able to do quite some recordings with the Emotibit, which has been a lot of fun. And I have some kind of real world metrics on battery time, which again, is probably going to be boring for most folks, but it's what we've got. So this is the 2500 milliamp hour battery. And this is not what it comes with. It comes with a 400 milliamp hour. And but it turns out that this is like a very nice, reasonable size to just kind of have sitting on top of the unit with the 3D printed case. So the 400 milliamp hour is good for about 25 minutes of streaming Wi-Fi. And I just felt like that wasn't, I mean, if you're doing Bluetooth, you're fine. And if you're doing SD card recording, you know, you can get 8 hours out of it. But if you're doing Wi-Fi, you get about 25 minutes out of it. And so our soft target for recording lengths is like 3 hours. We just feel like we should be able to support a 3-hour recording gracefully, whether or not you want to do those kinds of things. And so, yeah, this battery ended up being great. So yeah, it's $15. But now we have some cool real world parameters. And I would say, like with any device that you're first experimenting with, just play around with it and you know, see what the things are. So for our uses, it's like, okay, great. This will be our standard battery size. And I can tell you it's really solid and stable. You can do multi-hour recordings. Everything works fine. And one more thing I didn't know about ahead of time, if you want to do galvanic skin response electrodermal recordings, you need to put on the device about 15 minutes before you do any of those recordings. That gives the sweat time to accumulate below the sensor so that it actually gets a reading. So that's a little bit different for me than most devices. I would say like EG, the maximum amount of time that I would usually need to wait is like 3 to 4 minutes for the electrodes to settle if it's, sinking into the skin a little bit or whatever. But yeah, like, it's good to know, again, a little interesting factor about GSR, which is like, hey, you want to put it on a while before you start the experiment.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Hi, Mohammed. So we're not quite ready to move into, or we're if it's okay with you, we'll put off. Or were you going to do news and do we
We
have?
can skip it.
I can promise you that Alex and I have not spoken since the last meeting, and that this is completely unscripted and without any professional preparation.
I love extemporaneous things,
Yeah.
and I feel like the sincere, genuine. I'm BSing.
But and yes, and Simon has joined us, which is awesome.
Hi, Simon.
We will someday we will get his system actually with a mic and a camera.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to have you in the chat, and like I was saying, we are happy to discuss any links that you drop in the chat. Would be terrific. It's great that they are saved. I still need to do something with Ryan's scrape of last year, of like 2020's meetups. Not just sorry. There's the scrape of the
Right.
meetup agendas, and
Right.
then there's his notes, or the capture of all the chat that happened with Jitsi.
Right.
Has Jitsi never changed that? Anyway, yes, that's right. OpenAI has made GPT-3 available for all. Let the shenanigans begin, and what I can be sure of is that we still not passed anything close to a Turing test.
May I pour some cold water on that from real world testing with GPT-3? And the only thing I'll tell you is it's open, but it's not free. And I know that sounds like I'm being cheesy.
What's that mean?
They charge you per compute time, and you have to pay unless they
get like you sign up and have an account.
Mm-hmm. And they get all your data, and they get all your experiments, and they get every query that you're running, and you pay a lot for every query, and you don't get anything resembling a training log or a stochastic curve. So you're kind of blindly training. You get some results, and you pay a lot for your iteration. Now, this is not meant to, but I was a little bit surprised by the experience, in the sense of like, it's really cool that you can do this sort of content agnostic matching. Like whatever it is you're trying to do, whether it's words or if you convert images, whatever, GPT will find patterns, right? That's what's so cool about it. But I feel like if you're trying to do text experiments, GPT-3 will go great, and it will work with prompts, it will work with associations, it will work with a lot of other things. But the more exotic stuff that you would typically do with like lots of training and iteration and whatever, I just found that to be a little bit black box. But super awesome. I would experiment with it. I was hoping it would be like a utility AI that anybody could use for training anything. But yeah, it's a little more complex than that.
Yeah. So well, I'm sorry, I'm just reading what Manuel's adding
Mhm.
here. And so, I mean, if you need Azure credits, okay, um, didn't Microsoft just release essentially a bigger model? And I'm wondering if it is, so
Well,
um, so I'm seeing that this is how this is certainly how all the companies are doing their quantum computing, right?
mhm,
It's
mhm.
like sure, it's free in the sense that, like, sign up, give us your credentials, right? um we will it's like it's kind of like collab, right?
Mhm,
It's like,
mhm.
well, we'll sort of give you some free time, but like, as long as you're not really doing anything serious, right? As long as you're
Exactly.
doing something toy, and of course we'll know exactly what you're doing because you'll be essentially sending it to us. Um, uh, is there is that was yes, yes. So Mega, I love the names. Megatron Turing. Cool. And like, yeah, it's bigger. So I think it's definitely worth following, NLP if you're interested in AGI and you can speak in acronyms. uh, um, but I thought it was interesting that there's some progress on multilingual, like multi-language translation. Like multi-language translation for a whole batch of languages has finally surpassed the performance of specific, like, English French translation or English German like, focusing on just one translation has always been better than approaching, multi-language translation. And at least on the benchmarks, the common benchmarks, that these particular researchers use, that multi-language translation has taken over. That's really interesting in terms of telling you something about, like, the internals of the model, even if you can't necessarily, fully access those internals, or like make sense of those internals. Like, those internals are obviously capturing a deeper level uh, uh, understanding of language structure, deep structure, uh, um, that is finally paying off in terms of, being able to handle, I don't know, Finnish to Finnish to Hungarian. Actually, those are probably a little close to each other. Yeah, Finnish to German, as opposed to, you know models that are been kind of hand tuned for things. Um, so
So
I think in terms of, I'm interested to know, like, what people would consider similar kinds of better performance when we're talking about, like, it's not adding more data, or, adding more, you know I don't know what Megatron Turing is adding beyond just being bigger. uh,
it,
um, yeah.
so we had a question from Mohammed who wanted to present soon because it's getting late
Oh,
on the East Coast. So we'll
sure.
definitely do that.
Okay. Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah. Sorry for East Coast people. We
yeah,
always are accommodating.
absolutely. And I'll just when we're done with that presentation, we'll circle back to the OpenAI because there's just a few things I think are worth mentioning, like the
Sure.
models that you have to choose between, all that stuff. Anyway, but let's not
Let's.
tie up.
I'm glad you're. Thank you for tracking that in the. Yeah. So, do you want to switch over
Yes.
now?
Well, let's invite him to the stage,
Yeah.
and
And
if
Mohammed,
anybody
is there
else,
anybody else that you'd like to join us on stage, so to speak? Let us know.
yeah, we can do.
And
Oh yeah.
where is Lady Ada's factory? Because it's New York. I mean, I don't know if it's like Manhattan or it's like not where you'd expect it, but I don't know. There was just a slight for a moment there. I was like, I wonder if you're down the street from Ada Fruits factory, because I know that their factory was recruited into COVID PPE manufacturing uh, uh, back in the early days of the pandemic. Um, anyway, there's yeah, good reason. They have beautiful views from their office, or I think Connor was trying to sweeten the deal with this is what you'd be looking at. Um,
That is
so
wonderful though, because I think if we look at the rising tide lifts all boats aspect, the amount of money, investment, traction, and whatever in the field is really growing. So when we first started hacking on this in 2016, OpenBCI was like a smaller company than it is now.
yeah, well, I mean the
And
Galia deal alone is huge, right?
exactly.
And um, I'm still I'm still waiting to see that killer neurotech uh, um, gaming advantage, like
So
how.
Morgan, hold on.
Yeah,
I
bring it.
also, for the last few years, have been waiting for the same thing. And you know
Okay.
who the I'm gonna mispronounce his name, but like Masij, the Polish hardware headband
Yes.
company.
Or like I think I know the person you're talking about. Like certainly someone that will post things on Slack.
Yes. So and I apologize. I mean, it's recorded how badly I pronounced his name, so you can definitely make fun of me for it afterwards. But I'm just trying my best. All right. So they've got a device that has this unique component. They push the sample rate up to 1,000. The reason they did that was they believe they can find stuff in high gamma above 30 hertz that they find really important. And so part of their way that they analyze it,
Well, sorry,
I
I was going to say, and they can get it into the game and affect change.
yeah. So this was really like his demo blew my mind, and I never. So he takes that and he translates it into the four cross canonical grid of approach, avoidance, and then like valence. I forget exactly what it is, but it's a four axis grid. But it is the nervous system mapping, right? So it's like a very clear claim that you're in approach or avoidance. And so what they did was, since they could classify this stuff well, they made an enemy that when you're in approach, stands still and lets you kill it. And when you're in avoidance, leaves you alone and doesn't attack you. And everyone had a great time with that. Then they made another enemy that every time you're in approach, it runs away from you. And every time you're in avoidance, it comes and attacks you. So it kind of does the opposite of what you want. And they found that people really hated that enemy. So to whatever extent the demo really surprised me that I'd never seen a practical implementation. But what this falls back to is the original Halo loop. Um, Bungie back in the 2000 figured out that there was this 30-second loop that they wanted to design their game around. They felt that what this loop contained was kind of like you see a pack of enemies, you want to attack them. So you're going to start, you're full of resources, you're full of shields, you're full of ammo. You go in there like, hey, let's do it. So you start shooting them, and stuff's going to happen. Your shields are going to go down, you're going to run out of bullets, and the enemies are going to start shooting back at you. So there's going to be this moment where you're forced from this approach that you're doing into an avoidance. And the way that they would do it is they would force you behind a rock to regenerate your shields, because like if you hide behind a rock, they can't shoot you, and your shields regenerate if you hide for like 5 to 10 seconds. So they found a gameplay way to put you in avoidance mode temporarily, right? By making you feel vulnerable once your shields are up, because shields are replenishable, but health isn't. So you're going from like a combat able state to a long-term damage state, right? It's undesirable state to fight in. So I think that I saw some really interesting parallels here where basically without understanding that that's what they were doing, I think that Bungie was doing that and created their AI to kind of play with you and respond with you, even though they weren't measuring your state. They were just inferring it from the game. This was a more explicit device where you could really have, you could understand, does the player want to continue the fight or no? And then you can have the game respond to that really dynamically. So I have to say that before I saw that demo, I had never seen a compelling use case, but after I saw that demo, I was like, I would play that game. Just to feel
Cool.
it.
I mean, that's what I'm waiting for, or, I'm waiting to experience that.
Yeah.
And can you remember his, it's MAR?
Yes, let me go on. I think I can find it. Give me a moment. This is the worst possible. Give me just one moment. Let me see if I can find it. This is going to be bad.
Of course, for me, going, if I have to go back, this.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. Brain Attach is the name of the.
Brain Attach. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
And yes, and his name is spelled, and I apologize again. I should be doing this better, but I felt like a jerk asking him to pronounce the name when I'm sorry. There's some insight into me. I'm a weird guy. So yeah, and then
if you've got the biotactical gameware.
So I have to say this was the coolest demo that I've seen in the past few years.
When did he do this demo? Was this a hack night, or was this
yes, he joined us on October 7th, and he stayed up until 6 in the morning to join us. So he was really but he got long COVID when he was doing a sales pitch a year ago, and he said it profoundly affected his business. He did a trip, when the pandemic started, to pitch investors or whatever.
Sure.
And
sure.
Yeah. So I found even that interesting, and he was very focused on the gaming, but I was like, have you recorded your brain with EEG?
Now that I think about it, do you remember we were going to have someone come and talk about a Python neurofeedback package? He's from Europe, and anyway, I know that he's pivoted to COVID.
Really?
And I'm so I saw him post something recently. He's talking about the incubator. It was related to the incubator that he's in right now, but his LinkedIn was pitching a COVID spin on what looked like EEG monitoring, EEG monitoring neurofeedback. Yes, yes, please. Sorry, I'm just reading what you just said.
Just letting folks know if they get tired of us chit-chatting.
Right.
We can try to be on top.
So related to that, some things that we should bring up, or hopefully, well, I wanted to just go back a little bit in terms of what Mohammed was saying about TTCS devices.
Please.
Right? In that they you know, like Fisher Wallet, like I'm going to just do a quick check, but I don't believe that Fisher Wallace has any approval for a particular clinical disorder. And I would love to hear otherwise, as I have sent them. In that, like, I'd like to hear that too. So, I mean, just going to their, uh, um, right. So, again, I could be wrong, and due diligence. I should do searches to see if this has changed since it's been at least 9 months, probably a year since I've done any search. But FDA cleared does not mean what people think it means, right?
Yeah, there's
FDA
like stages,
just
right?
so depending on the device, right? But FDA cleared is not FDA approved for a disorder, right?
Right.
And if you dig into, and the FDA's database is publicly available, if you dig into the device approval for this, what you'll typically see for these companies, especially when they are targeting disorders that kind of don't have treatments, right? Right. And so, like, anxiety, depression, insomnia, right?
Right.
Now, again, like, there are some things that you can show as a group, in group studies, you can show that there is some efficacy for, right? However, that is still very different than being approved for that particular disorder and being able to be, and this is, a somewhat US thing, but being able to get reimbursed from an insurance company for that treatment or for purchasing that device, right? The reason that these sell direct to consumer is that these are not approved for reimbursement. Okay. And that the what you will see, especially with the companies that are really expensive, right? So the MEG manufacturers, for instance, right, will talk a lot about getting CPT codes, right, for a particular treatment, right? So a CPT code is saying now insurance companies can look up your code and they can be like, I'm billing for, a uh, fetal brainwave analysis, right? Is being something that the MEG manufacturers said, hey, we're able to do this, and you don't want to do this with the EG, okay? I'm making up this, but I know that MEG manufacturers got CPT codes, and that was a big deal because, again, an MEG system costs a lot of money. And if you're going to house one in a hospital, it better be able to get reimbursement for procedures, and because devices in hospitals have to pay for themselves. Okay, like they've got number crunchers who are asking how many billable sessions or billable hours can that device get per month, and to justify the financing to purchase the device in the first place, right? These are different disorders. Sorry, I tried to. Is that still coming through? Is that muted now?
I can still hear it a little bit. Here, I'll mute your mic. There was. Here,
But
I'll
sorry,
unmute. Sorry.
just to finish that. Like, just to be clear, when you see FDA cleared, what that means is that the device is considered by the FDA to be substantially equivalent to a device that was approved a long time ago. That device was a stimulator, an electrical stimulator that was approved in, I believe, in neurosurgery. We're talking about the original device. Again, I'd love to have people come back to me with links and things. I got a great so Maren Bixum, who again, is the first author on the paper I posted in the chat there from the Brain Stimulation Journal, right? Sent me a really nice figure that gave the history of TDCS, kind of, the timeline with major points of interest, and let me see. Well, and so I'm just going to drop a link to this. It is from a paper of his. Yeah, so he's. So you can see it, because I think it's really important that he put in something here, which is like, the history of TDCS started in 2000. And I think he calls it modern TES, right? And I think one of the reasons that he's adding that particular adjective is that he's trying to distinguish it from the devices that are using substantially equivalent to a previous device, because that previous device goes back decades, and I mean, many decades. So you can see this picture. I asked him about this because he posted something similar for TMS, which was another really interesting one. And again, I dropped in chat that, like, TMS, what I dropped in about TMS for OCD, I think is really important, just because the way in which the FDA describe it, right, is FDA permits marketing of TMS for this treatment, right? And yeah, so it's not FDA cleared, or
Right.
like that TMS device was probably FDA cleared earlier than that.
Right.
And what that meant was that, like, this, people made a TMS originally, and this is substantially equivalent to that TMS. It's not adding any new features, and it's not, it doesn't add any new technology. Go ahead.
I have two things that I wanted to mention based on the discussion. Actually, the number of things keeps filling up, so we're going to be talking about it for weeks. But let's start with the simple stuff. I thought this was really neat. You have heard of Divergence Neuro and their big announcement and so on, but perhaps if you haven't, they were on the NeuroTech X showcase about a month ago or 2 months ago. They were one of the first guests. Look, they're based out of Toronto. They have a fascinating business model. They give people a Neurosity crown to take home. And this is done under, like, clinical supervision. They have a therapist, they have a clinician, they have something that they're receiving treatment for. And they wear the device 20 minutes a day or something like that. The data gets uploaded to the portal. They have access to it. The clinician has access to it. And then the clinician makes decisions on treatment based on the markers. Here, I'll share the screen for just 1 second and show the video. But yeah, like, this is, yes, there's a crown, and, they have these various settings that these things are, neurofeedback is typically done in. But the idea is here, you go home, you put on the Neurosity crown. This seems to be the app that will be available. So this is going to be, I'm sure there's like a cloud portal, there's an app component, so on. But this is done through insurance, I believe. And this is done, I believe that they got some pretty significant approval to do this for depression. So this is not a stimulation for depression. This is like, use this for monitoring patients that are receiving treatment for depression so that the clinician can see the progress. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I'll turn off it.
No. I mean, so super important to know what country this is being marketed in.
Canada.
So it is in Canada. So
I want to find the announcement, but yes, I was sure that it was being done in Canada. Yeah, right.
We should find out, because again, that makes a big difference. Or certainly, like right. If you want to get the reason I became familiar with CPT codes was partly because of electrical geodesics, and partly because of actually a technique called magnetic resonance spectroscopy, right? And the magnetic resonance spectroscopists knew that if they need the sequence takes about 15-20 minutes, right? Which in MRI time is a long time, right? So yeah. The kind of structural T1s that you're kind of used to can be done much faster than that. The kind of clinical, if you've got a stroke or something, you might get some of the non T1 sequences. Some of those are slow, some of those are fast. So I mean, you can. Anyway, I won't get into the MR physics, but the main thing being that if your neuroradiologist wants to add on, half an hour of magnet time so that they can get these kinds of scans, they need to justify something on the order of $300, right? In terms of straight costs. And of course, they're going to add on something. So it's going to be more than that, right? And so that's a lot of money. So to get that to be reimbursable, then you needed to get a CPT code. And so when MRS became a CPT code, I think for drowning, I think they got it added as like a marker of how many dead neurons essentially that you had. And this was, being kind of pioneered down in Southern California, where there were unfortunately a lot of kids, being left in pools by themselves and drowning, and then they're unresponsive. And what you're trying to figure out is, are they unresponsive, but it's going to come back, or are they unresponsive and that this is, going to be like a long drawn out coma. And anyway, so it was a big deal. And I don't think that, so I don't know of any stimulator, TES, that has been approved and has a CPT code, Now, I think that I did drop a link for Neuroelectrics because, we talked about that last year.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that, like, hey, she got this, Anna is the Marquez, I believe, is the CEO of Neuroelectrics. And so, this was a big deal where it's like green lights, Neuroelectrics, but I think, yes. So it sounds like, right, the FDA has approved this for marketing. It recently received approval by the FDA to conduct a clinical trial, right? So in other words, they got approval to do a study, right? And again, it's, I'm not saying that Anna's like trying to mislead people on this. Everybody knows that this is a top-notch closed loop, device manufacturer for research, uh, um, you know, and like somebody needs to do these kinds of studies, right, for the fields to yeah, to get this kind of CPT code if it's found to be effective. And at this point, they're really going to need to show efficacy that is close to the Saint study, or because that was pretty darn dramatic. What Stanford's showing. Anyway,
I
just
thought it was neat that we've reached the point that in 2016, yes, there are these $250 devices and they're wonderful for meditation, but they have a lot of limitations. But now with this crown, $900, and a company is willing to put this in consumer hands for, I mean, months really.
well, I mean,
And I
I was just pushing the notion for somebody who was interested in Alzheimer's, uh,
right,
like no, I should say dementia, like monitoring.
right,
So can you use EEG to do a kind of risk assessment? And this is on the basis that you see with that groups in Europe have certainly shown with MEG, where it's just like we show as a leading indicator of dementia, we show a drop in peak alpha. So
mm-hmm,
if you can get these subjects, when they're certainly like MCI or hopefully even normal, and they progress into MCI and progress into AD, you see a shift, and hopefully FOOF would be even more powerful in the sense that like it's probably not just a shift in the peak alpha. It's
right,
probably an over, there's
mm-hmm,
probably something about your entire power spectrum that's changing, just
yep,
because we have every reason to believe that peak alpha is, yeah, it relates to global dynamics. You'd probably see other changes too, right? And we know that FOOF was kind of created to demonstrate changes in
right,
high gamma noise floor is kind of
right,
what Bradley was originally marketing it for,
mm-hmm.
and like what's your slope when you get
Yes,
past, I mean, I think the original paper with Bob Knight was like past 80 hertz or something. Like it was like high up there. um
I've looked at that paper so many times, and there's this one plot that I love, and if you want, we can bring it out, but it really shows. So it's a Wojtek 1/f aging. That's the
yeah,
search criteria. That's the
and that's the
magic words.
that was his first paper, and it was
But it was
and
so
it was
good.
it was intracranial, so that's why
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of somewhat um low numbers. I mean, but I think he had like 50 subjects. I'm gonna see how much how well do I remember this paper. Is that not even close?
15.
15.
One
Okay,
five.
1.5.
So
Nonetheless,
but
but
this is
intracranial.
this is the money. This is the money plot right here. The power spectrum by age.
Just a
And
sec.
so,
Sorry.
mhm. And this is the really good plot.
Right. Right.
So,
That's interesting because that is not. I mean, I know that these subjects are not. Okay. All right. I will. I will need to do story time very quickly.
yes,
So I'm going to come back, but I would like to jump back in with that particular paper
great.
because if I remember right, though, those subjects were not much over 60. that
Yes, and oh,
he
sorry.
had he had a line. You know, he was obviously doing a by age analysis, but
Yes, he did 11 20 to 30-year-olds and 13 60 to 70-year-olds. Sorry, we'll get back when talk to you soon. Hi, Sasha.
you remember Alex? Yeah. So we'll be right back.
Cool.
It doesn't reach. I don't think until you get like 70 and
Right.
and higher. I mean, it would be really interesting to see what like Adam Ghazali sees with his healthy aging
Right.
cohort. Right.
Right.
He's got a lot of subjects with EEG. They are definitely not MCI, right?
Right.
These are, in some cases, these are behaviorally doing as well or better than young adults.
Hmm.
Uh, but I am curious, you know, if they've been foofed,
Right.
and
Yeah, I would
are,
love to see
you
that.
know, how much are we seeing, like what kind of changes are we seeing? So be
Cool.
back in like 15 minutes.
See you soon, Morgan. Thanks so much. All right. So listen, the quality of the program is about to nosedive, but let's let's suffer through it until Morgan gets back and things get more interesting. So in terms of the divergence neuro thing, I just thought that was amazing. I mean, we're going to be talking about a company that's willing to put consumer high quality EEG out there in the field, a roughly $1,000 device, and it's going to be used by many individuals. I find this very exciting. Right now, the only EEG consumer device is the Muse, and the Muse is wonderful, but that's it. And it's really good for meditation, but people only wear it when they're meditating. The Crown is an awesome change because it's 8 channel, it's super high quality. You can wear it for 2 hours. It's got Wi-Fi instead of Bluetooth, which means if you just have a network, you don't have to do anything fancy. So it really, really, really changes the game. And I think it's wonderful that we're going to have real world stuff. Neurosity is going to make new devices that are going to be robust and excellent in real world data because they're going to deal with all the issues that come from that, right? And once you get burned, you just sort of, okay, I definitely don't want to deal with this again. So you try to fix those problems that you couldn't really anticipate. You just have to hit in real world testing. So I'm just personally so excited between the Galia and the mass deployment of the Crown, because for the first time ever, we're going to have thousands and thousands of people sharing data. And that's just really, really awesome to me. Okay, so we'll go back to the age-related changes in neuroscience, diversity neuro. I wanted to talk, there was one other thing that I saw that was really cool in the BCI Awards. This was on Slack. And I think we mentioned it when I was talking about BCI Awards, but I did want to highlight this, which is, I had never heard of this company before called Stentrode, but we were talking earlier about Neuralink, and they have a really fascinating thing, which is they're really copying Neuralink, but they're doing it as a injectable. I just thought this was really neat. So this is their technology. They have this they put this in the blood vessel and this mesh. This reminds me of the laparoscopic procedures or the catheter-based things, or the ones where something is being into your blood vessels. And so obviously brain and blood vessels are more sensitive, but still this is neat. I mean, so Elon's approach is, okay, we'll have a robot surgically do it, but I'd be interested in how invasive the application is here. Like, how do they get the needle into the blood vessel? I guess that's the part we're not as interested in. But I did think this was cool. So synchron brain interface with the stentrode, and they can instead of surgical procedure, they can inject this mesh wire into your blood cells or blood vessels, and then these act as electrodes in your brain. I do remember that the Neuralink had a lot of observations around how the brain will put matter. And when they first put the Neuralink electrodes into your brain, everything is fine. They have a clean signal. They work great, and so on. But over time, the brain puts scar tissue over the electrodes, and that cuts the signal. And then eventually they don't work as well. And I think that process was described as taking something like 6 months. That sounded really horrific on some level to me. I'm like, man, we're talking scar tissue. We're talking this and that. Like, that just doesn't sound like the brain is happy about that being there. And please pardon my ignorance. I cringed a little hearing that. But I ask the same question here. Now I understand blood vessels and whatever, but are we talking clotting? Are we talking buildup? I don't mean to sort of cast aspersions on this. These are the questions that for me spring to mind when I hear stuff like this. But I do think this is super cool. I do think this is really interesting, and I hope it's safe and effective, and that we get to see some people benefit from it. So yeah, I just thought this was neat. The GTech PCI Award 2021 first place was this stentrode system. All right, I'm gonna close. Yeah, I did not. I haven't been able to find a lot of research on this stentrode technology. I mean, this kind of took me by surprise, just because I'd never heard of anything like that, and I thought it was super neat. So I'd love to know more about how people are doing. How did they get approval to do this, to the study on 4 people? Very fascinating and pretty interesting. So now we have 2 kind of Neuralink-esque things. Neuralink, this stentrode, and now there's the new device. Apologies for, but the device that Mohammed. Wait. It's their webpage is Mind. Great. So yeah, now there's the Mind device as well. So I thought that was really neat. I mean, maybe when Morgan returns, we can ask him about stentrode as well. I'd love to hear his take on how they did it and what approvals they got. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Morgan talked about this, and he's very passionate. But it seems like this imagined handwriting form of BCI is far, far, far better than anything that was tried before. All the ones where it was like, think of a letter and we will decode you thinking about the letter A or the letter B or whatever. Those just didn't work very well. And we looked at the Facebook video that got something like 15 words per minute. But the imagined handwriting, I believe, just in the paper was over 40 words per minute with like a really high accuracy. And that video is basically talking about a presentation at the Tencent conference. So lots of funding, lots of research, basically talking about the progress that they're making about imagined handwriting. And I just think that is super neat. Unfortunately, I'm so bad with names. I'm sure Krishna is. Yes, Stanford, professor of engineering. And let's see. Do we see? Search for that plus Neuralink. Yes, he is. That is spot on. He is an advisor at Neuralink and was talking about the monkey demo and so on. So that is super neat. So I think the imagined handwriting is going to be a big thing. And it seems like everyone is chasing that as kind of like, hey, this is going to be the first functional real world thing we can do to help locked in patients communicate. and actually do so efficiently and easily and non-invasively. And I think this is amazing. This is really, really amazing. So I would say people are off to the races, and we are 1 to 2 years away. This is just my own speculation. If I'm incorrect, please come back in a year or two and poke fun at me. But I think we're a year or two away from people really, really being able to do significant communication using Imagine handwriting and BCI interfaces. I also think that that's going to be one more thing that pushes BCI way into the mainstream. As of now, people think BCI is really cool, and I agree, and you can use it for demos, and it is cool for that. But I mean, an application like this that was widespread, robust, worked in real world settings, and didn't require any kind of surgery, that would be a game changer. Everything would become a BCI. And I mean, I think we're already headed there with the VR stuff, but still, I mean, wow, that would catapult things to another level. So I think one of the interesting things over the past few years is we've had a lot of like students come to us and just chat about majors, things to research, things to study, things to focus on, emerging fields, and so on. And I remember, like in 2017, people would ask, you know, what's the business market like for neuroscience and BCI? And it just, things were much more limited. This seems to me like, wow, if you were going to explore these topics and if you were going to explore this research, I think we are hitting that inflection point where it really is worth considering, where this is going to be a lucrative field, where the specialized knowledge is going to pay off, and that there's probably going to be this period of more demand for people that understand BCI and this technology than there is supply. And that's always a good place to be. So again, highly speculative, but I would say that the signs keep pointing in positive directions. Okay. I wanted to feature the Facebook Control Labs demo that they just showed off, including the Haptic Glove. So this is the Facebook post, and I am old enough to remember the Power Glove from Nintendo. I'm sorry. And the movie, there was a competition, and anyway, yes. So I do find it amazing that in 2021, you know, the Power Glove is real, and it's used for VR. It's not used for the Nintendo Entertainment System. But yeah, here we are. Facebook Haptic VR glove, and proof of concept, consumer device, too expensive. All those are the things that we can enjoy with prototypes. But again, I do think that this is a very good sign. And it's also interesting that in terms of progress, this haptic mapping, oh my God, that was way too loud. Let's get that sound down. Cool. That this haptic technology really, really seems to be working for Facebook. So the BCI interface stuff, they experimented with for years and really didn't have much success to show. This is looking really, really mature and really legitimate and really compelling. So yeah, the Ready Player One gloves are closer than you might think. And I have to imagine that that would be pretty cool. A feeling of texture and playing around and persistence. And that the feedback from Facebook really comes down to, yes, the technology matters, but the experience is even more important. All these things need to work together seamlessly. All of these things need to be synchronized, and the latencies need to be right, and you know, all those other things. So I think that's really, really the tricky part is getting it all done within the render times. And most VR headsets run at like higher frame rates, 90 hertz. So you're really, really talking small frame times of 11 milliseconds. And that's just not a lot of time to compute a lot of stuff in the frame. So if you assume that everything needs to be done within a few milliseconds, 5-6 milliseconds for the state to be communicated, that is a lot of math to do in that time with hardware that the Quest 2 is basically like a smartphone CPU. So, we still see these limitations of compute, transmission, and so on in VR, but Facebook seems to be making wonderful progress with the control labs technologies and haptic gloves and so on. I think this is consistent with their shifting of focus to VR, and it really seems like they're getting a lot of traction out of this. So I just thought that was really cool. There is one more. Morgan's back. Oh yes, that's right. And there was that startup. I saw that article, but I wasn't sure. How much smoke there was. Hi, Morgan.
I'm just reading the.
Oh yes, I was talking about the new Control Labs demo from Facebook that they did with the. They've really matured the prototype, and it looks phenomenal. I don't know if you saw the demo they just did.
Our haptics is our haptics X. Anyway, somebody's a little upset that it looks like there's
yes, this is
Stentrode was probably done in animals first, and certainly has a great history.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Are you familiar with the technology? Stentrode?
Stentrode?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
what is it? I'm sorry for my, not being aware of it. It looks like they're injecting a mesh into the blood vessels.
Well, think of it this way, right? Is I think it's really useful to put it in the context of neurosurgery in general, right?
Okay.
So why, or another big selling point of Neuralink, right, was not that they were just doing a really high channel count, interface. It was that they were going to have this medical robot.
Right. Yeah, the surgical fishing line.
It was like, again, this was like phase, first phase, and it was like, entry point here, and then this like magic wire that would be able to reach anything, right? And a big part of it was that this is why like material science was so important, was that they needed a wire that could be, really thin, but still be able to carry all this data, but to push that wire through the brain and do as little damage as possible, right? Because in neurosurgery, this is why the pre-surgical planning is like longer than the operation, right? Is how are we going to, we're going to get all this imaging on the person. We're going to figure out like where, what it is what are we trying to do, right? As best as possible. Know that before we go in, right? And then we're going to figure out how are we going to get there with our tools, and again, how do we get there with doing the least damage to the intervening tissue, right? And so what you certainly see, again, it's really great to follow brain oncology, because obviously this is their bread and butter. Is, we know that there's a mass here, and we're even more than, say, neurosurgery in general. We've got certain techniques that are able to potentially, destroy it in where it is. And again, this is where like gamma knife and other techniques come in. but there are also these I mean, at least when I did my first clinical MRI courses, one of those was down in Long Beach, and the doctor, the person running the course at the time at Long Beach Memorial was someone really involved with these cryo techniques of like, we're going to stick a rod, we're going to try and get a rod as close as possible, and then we're going to freeze the tumor.
Right. The way that they do
And,
with skin issues. Right?
Yeah, and it's like every imaginable way to destroy tissue has been tried in brain, in oncology. He went on to become the chair of radiology for UCSD, and
Wow.
and like did a lot to get more MRI and high field MRI.
It seems like UCSD is on the way up in terms of prestige. By the way, it's incredible.
He still has the best text. Let's see if I find that. So right. So neurosurgery. Right. So Stentrode, until you understand that, like, the kind of peripheral damage of neurosurgery is its big drawback, right? And another like old technique, when you look back into the 40s and 50s and what Penfield and those guys were doing at Montreal Neurological Institute, among other places, was doing this like mapping of Eloquent Cortex,
right?
Like finding parts of the cortex that you knew you had to like cut into, right? But you were trying to find sort of non-essential areas of cortex to make your entry, right? To have your tools to this was the challenge, and there's the Stentrode idea, and it does have some cool technologies to it, but I like to just step back and say, like, what are they trying to do? Is they're trying to get electrodes into the brain, right, without doing surgery, right? And basically what they're doing is they're riding another branch of medicine called interventional radiology, right? And there are, I mean, basically any medical discipline that is basically snaking something down.
Yeah, I was talking about like laparoscopic procedures because that was the best example I could think of.
It is, right? And so instead of, the Neuralink thing was like, we're going to make a hole in the skull here, and then we're going to like have this really fine wire, and somehow magically this fine wire is not going to destroy anything. Right now, you saw that in their version 2.0, right? It was suddenly like, no, we're going to drill a hole wherever it is that we're trying to hit, like over it, and we're going to replace the skull there, and we're going to go the shortest distance possible to the tissue that we're trying to hit, right? And that's the reason. And what these guys are saying is like, well, again, by getting under the skull, we can do so much. So why don't we drill a hole into, through the skull?
So it is, right? It is drilling a hole so that you can get a needle through.
You could, and I'm not a surgeon. I don't play one on TV.
Sure.
But I don't know how far you'd want to go, and I don't know how many things you want stuck up in your up your aorta, or now I'm forgetting now which you'd want to use, but again, it really depends on where you want to put these, right? But the idea being that you are putting electrodes into the wall of your vasculature,
right,
in places that you want to be close to, right?
So
Not ideal, and it's definitely not trying to get into the brain tissue itself. So
right,
there's going to be, these are essentially far field measurements that they're going to do, right?
right.
So even if it's not EEG, it's going to share some of the math and physics that you use for EEG to get that, because this is well, it's still, it's kind of like uh, um, the grids that they put, so like
For
neurosurgery
the
is
chips,
putting
right? The
grids.
implanted chips of like 100 neurons, 200 neurons, right? And this is
Well,
like grids in the vasculature.
yeah, this is grids in the vasculature. Um, could be a lot of you're going to want a lot of electrodes,
Right.
and by having that grid be spread across a range, like again, like say you go for one of the major veins or something like that, and you can have a bunch of them so that they become an array, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then you can use all the same source imaging
Right.
physics
Mm-hmm.
to kind of hone in on potentially like an area of interest.
Do you know if it's
And you can be doing the same things that Ed Chang and his kind of group is doing, where when they put in these 256 grids, and then they put in these little strips, and they put in the strips because again they're trying not to damage the brain,
mm-hmm.
right? So they're just putting the strips into the folds of the brain,
Right.
but it's all kind of on the outside of the brain,
Right.
right?
It's
And again, it's this
on the
whole
brain
point of like,
directly, but it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
in the
yeah,
brain.
we've taken the skull off,
Right.
which is invasive enough, right? And it's certainly
Yes.
like, it involves all sorts of things, but mainly any surgical procedure that requires anesthesia is a risk.
Oh,
um, um,
yes.
and so but that's Stentrode's selling point.
Is it permanent?
And I want to say it got some sort of approval last
Yeah, yeah. Recently, I think they did.
2020.
They implanted it in 4 people, and they had some results that they were showing.
But it could be very much it could be like neuroelectrics, where it's just like they got approval to do a study,
Right.
you know and um but I do want to say that, like, the reason that everybody's getting this substantially equivalent to a device from the 1960s is that, this is what Carl Prubram used to joke about when I was just a RA in his lab, was that, like, because he was a brain surgeon in like the 30s and 40s, and he's just like, well, we were doing all this stuff in the 30s and 40s. like what the hell is you and your fancy fMRI doing,
Right.
so I mean, a lot of these things are, these are techniques that came, that the pioneers were people at Yale and
Mm-hmm.
people at Montreal, like, again, back in the 20s and 30s. And uh, by the 50s, these were surgeries that were very effective. And yeah, and now it's become, well, I mean, you see, there's uh, a lot more ability to get into vasculature and
Mm-hmm.
send cameras and things down, right? Um, uh, and the pre-surgical planning. So what I certainly saw was that, like, pre-surgical, yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, you need to. Um, so that was the father of another Walter Freeman. So it's funny because, yeah, Carl knew Walter Freeman. And then his son became a really famous neurophysiologist um, who also, what I really loved was Walter Freeman Jr. or the second. I forget what his name was. but he was a professor at Berkeley, and he talks a lot about mesoscale dynamics. That was the first time. It was his papers was the first that I saw that talked about mesoscale dynamics of EEG. And yeah, Carl had lots of horror stories about the 30s and 40s of brain surgery. He had people coming to him because, again, he was a brain surgeon, right? And he had people coming, but so Carl also became the head of the Yerkes Primate Center. Okay, so the real famous, he was missing a finger because a really famous primate bit his finger off. So, he had people asking him about patients where they had done brain surgeries based on surgeries that he did on primates. And they were like, and now the patient's unresponsive.
Wow.
Did
Did you want to?
That was a different time.
Did you want to double check the Wojtek paper?
Yeah, you want to go back to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but 15 subjects. He's got a paper. He's done.
There's another paper that was published in Nature that is far fancier, I believe, and more recent.
More subjects.
I think it focused on the parameterizing neural spectrum. It was talking about FOOF, so it was a little more computational.
Well, I mean, there's now an official FOOF paper, right?
I think so.
I mean, Tom Donahue's got a paper now.
But the nature thing was a big deal. Let me go look at Wojtek Lab Twitter.
Yeah, let's
because he tweeted about that a few months ago, and I.
Yeah. So Alex, I mean, I just wanted to say that I've had some funny discussions with Leslie Kay, who's at the University of Chicago, in olfactory. She focuses on the olfactory system. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. You know her. Anyway, yeah, we've talked about. Yeah, because that was Leslie's. I think Leslie's advisor is Walter Freeman. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do remember that.
One more article I saw today.
Well, I wanted to talk about beacon biosignal. Have you talked about that?
No, I was just going to say olfactory. It's currently believed that over 1 million Americans have lost the sense of smell permanently as a result of COVID. Yeah. I think that's a fascinating. Sorry.
Yeah. So, that makes me think of Ed Rolls. No, yeah, it is Ed Rolls. And who was at Oxford. I think he's at Warwick now. Let's just see. Edmund. Yes. So this guy had he had some pretty awesome equipment, because like doing olfactory studies is hard. And it's a little like when we were trying to do operant conditioning of crabs underwater. It's like if you're delivering food into water, it will just disperse. And olfaction is the same thing, where it's just like, you can't just maybe if you're doing that like up the person's nose or something. And so it's cool that, I mean, EdRolls had this equipment that was kind of hard to miss in the imaging center because it was like gas masks attached to hoses,
Holy
so
Moses.
that while you're sitting in the scanner, you've got this, and that's the way to do olfactory studies, right? Um,
That's a
uh,
way.
that's a way, yeah. Well, it's the way to do it with humans, right?
No. That's.
And
I'm sure that was the best method. I'm just like, that's
yeah.
impressive.
Well, again, like you're trying to control it, right? I mean, you're trying to do
I get it.
olfactory physics, psychophysics, right?
And you want to
And
control the stimulus. Got it.
super hard, and you've got to suck out all the air. Once you've delivered a
Yeah.
stimulus, you
No.
need to then remove all that air that potentially carries some of that stimulus, because your nose is remarkable. Even though we're not canines, um, you need remarkably little to catch a smell, right? And you need to remove that if you want to switch between a pleasant stimulus and an unpleasant stimulus. Then you need to remove that, and
I'm
apparently
sorry.
I've
I'm
got
laughing because of
Alex.
a horrible movie, and it's just killing me because I'm now understanding something in a whole new light, and I'm just laughing my butt off. You'll have to forgive me. It's very inappropriate. I can't even describe it.
Okay,
Please continue.
okay,
Please continue.
good. I'll yeah,
We'll talk about it
we,
afterwards.
we
It's
won't
okay.
join you in the gutter. uh,
No. I'm the only one there. It's okay.
but check out, I mean, for those interested, Ed Rolls was doing um, olfactory studies back before COVID, and there's a lot to love about them. I mean, Leslie Kay wasn't doing the, like, when I talked to her about her own stuff, she's much more doing animal stuff. Apparently, Alex has decided to leave us now to have a moment.
I'm losing it, man. I can't. Just give me a minute to go get my composure.
Okay, you familiar? Okay, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, it's so well. There's a lot to be interested in. I've they only had two subjects, but I do have a data. If somebody's interested, and I would need to just check with the PI on this. But if somebody's interested in processing some olfactory MEG data, there's I've got some data sets that they would be interested in seeing. I'm willing to believe you can get a result, and I really loved your I'd really like to see more of your capsaicin stuff. Um,
Yes, I would like to rerun that with we got the eye tracker working again. We temporarily switched to new one so I could get the pupillometry and I could combine skin response, heart rate, and
yeah,
temperature
that's cool.
even because I was interested in that.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
so
So
stay tuned.
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to you know it I saw that report too about 1 million people have lost their sense of smell. I'm really curious of following those. So one, how do you demonstrate it? I mean, other than just asking them.
Yeah.
And because what you really want to do is, I mean, I would assume that it's still something akin to you know requiring corrected vision or something, like it's not that it's absent, it's just diminished, right?
Right.
And uh, so it would be it's a big question of how would you characterize the diminishment properly, and then what effects would you imagine, right? So there's a reason to believe that if you lack your tongue that you're missing a lot more than just the ability to speak, right?
Sure.
And that it has knock-on effects because of the lack of input to your taste. That okay. Oh, for temp illusions.
Wow.
You mean
I
like
had
temp,
no idea.
like temp sensation. So yeah,
Temporary.
did sorry, somebody. I mean, Alex posting about illusions made me think of something a new right. So there is a competition that for illusions,
No
and
way.
yeah, and
Holy Moses. Sorry.
a
This is
recent.
news to me.
No. Well, so vision scientists are super hot on this, right? So vision scientists are always looking for a new illusion that demonstrates that you are living in a mental construct. Okay,
Why?
because
Why are they so interested in that? I'm not asking that to be difficult. Why?
because it it tells you what what are the assumptions of your visual system, right?
Okay. The
Right.
implicit rules
So
of the processing algorithm.
an
Got it.
illusion is an optical stimulation that reveals, the, a
Gotcha. Gotcha.
bug in your
Or
visual
an
system assumption,
implementation of your visual system.
right? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
want to even call it a bug, right?
Right.
It's these are they're doing what they're supposed to do,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
it's covering 99% of use cases.
Right.
Right. And you're
Right.
trying
But
to
you find the
find,
one where it breaks. Yeah.
yeah. And here, let me just find it because
This is amazing. I had no idea. Wow.
I'm gonna
So when you feel the temperature on your nose or your whole body? Again, I apologize for such a silly question.
um,
Okay, so you can warm your nose. This is the Boris Yeltsin simulator. If you've ever wanted to know what it's like to have a really red nose.
oh,
I don't mean to pick on Boris. He did. He had that.
was
It's so red.
no, well, I thought it was, yeah. I was like, I think you just need to drink a couple bottles of vodka.
Is that the solution? I've been missing it this whole time.
Well, I believe
That was his protocol.
um, shoot, where did he? Oh, I think he. For some reason, this ended up in. So this is the only problem, is that, like, which of the Slack channels would someone post this in? Let me just check. Oh, maybe Threads. Threads will. He posted it in computational psychiatry, which doesn't really make sense. But this is awesome. It's an illusion about eye movements, and I don't know if it's going to come with a. We might have to. Yeah, no, it's exactly, it's supposed to be demonstrating that we live in the Matrix. Anyway, this is recent, and it's from again. So for those in San Francisco, we have an amazing eye research institute here at Smith Kettlewell, which is in a very nondescript office that's right on Fillmore and like intersection of Fillmore and California. And Chris Tyler is the director, and he's the guy who gave us the stereograms, the images that you can't see anything, but you've got to kind of let your eyes
Oh, the magic eye images. I forget what those were called.
Right,
Hold
right.
on.
So again,
Um,
it's like why would you come up with that, right? Well, he'll tell you
auto
why.
stereogram.
He'll tell you why you come up with these things because it is, uh, uh, again, it's giving you a uh, giving you an insight into how the visual system actually is working, right? And so Smith Kettlewell will have equipment set up so that you come and you look like you're going for an eye exam,
Mhm.
but this eye is going through a set of mirrors and prisms that's very different than this one, but they're presenting stimuli to each eye at just the right times and just the right kind, and they're putting that through different filters and things so that you're getting just the right stimulation to both eyes that is causing you know you know whatever effect that they're trying to bring out or highlight or manipulate or make into an experimental dimension, right? And it's incredible stuff that is super mathematical, physical, physics based, at, as well as being like incredibly tied to the underlying like microphysiology, and it's really amazing. Okay,
Well,
interesting,
the thing that I've
interesting.
always wanted to explore with capsaicin is, and I mean, this is literally the very first Emotibit experiment that I want to run, is there's this incredible warming sensation when you, especially with the cayenne oil that I'm using. So I have to disambiguate a little bit. Cayenne seems to have some potentially unique properties. And so it might be that capsaicin in general behaves one way and cayenne behaves another, or it could be that there's no difference whatsoever. I'm still trying to understand whether particular plants have compounds that do more than just the capsaicin or whether it's the capsaicin. But I sweat immediately. And I guess I was really interested is like, does my skin temperature change? Or am I simply sweating because of some internal process? And I mean, I don't like, I know colloquially people sweat a lot when they consume really spicy food. And from the few times that I've seen people go hog wild with it, they get very red. And so to me, that says an increase in actual temperature, but only I seen the the response seems to be on the head. Yeah, no,
I don't. I mean, I know. I mean, just because I really growing up in the UK, you go for
like
spicy
curries,
noodles,
right?
right? And spicy curries, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I know. I've got a spicy curry when the top of my head's sweating,
Yes,
and
always the.
and
I don't know why
my
it's the
nose
head
is
for me.
sweating.
Yeah,
It's
uh,
like,
yeah. You get a little snotty. You get the back of the head. You're like, whoo, yeah, I'm there. This is it, right?
but it seems very targeted.
Right?
I again,
Yeah, but I've never been able to figure it out. Are my armpits sweating? I'm a little busy during the reaction to kind of
I'm
like,
willing I'm willing to eat curry for science.
good, because we've got the
Yeah,
device for it, and maybe that could be one of our noise bridge experiments or something.
good.
I want
I
to
look forward
figure
to
it
it.
out. Because okay, so the Emotibit has
This is cool,
a
Alex.
medical infrared temperature sensor, so it
Yeah, yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah. So those guns are easy to find,
Mhm,
and you know who makes them?
mhm.
FLIR.
The that
And
company.
you
Wow.
know who makes who works for FLIR,
Who?
is Diego. I mean, so he's joined us previously.
Okay.
Um, uh, uh, I think sometimes he joined us from his car. I don't know if you remember that. Anyway, but he's he was in Portland. He's moved down to Eugene,
Okay.
and he and I have talked because he was based in Portland, about trying to start a Portland chapter and
Mhm.
get OHSU, uh, um, you know U of O, but U of O Electrical Geodesics, which is technically down in Eugene, but it's not that far, and Reed, which has an EEG lab, and yeah, and like those being kind of like our first speakers. I still think that would be awesome, and I didn't. We never got them to come talk, but there's a Python package developed at OHSU for not neurofeedback, but like experimental control.
Right.
For I think it's BCI Pi. I'm gonna check, but Barry Oken, I'm before I've finished typing Barry Oken. Yes, okay. Let's see if they would still be interested in coming up. Is this Canby Tech? Now they were doing, if I remember right, they were trying to do kind of assistive technology. And yeah, brain-computer interface software. I'm just gonna drop this. So maybe we can. Well, BCI Pi was updated 6 hours ago, so.
And it supports the wearable sensing DSI and GTech gear.
Right, so DSI.
Or I'm assuming DSI is the wearable sensing stuff.
I mean, isn't that the kind of like dry electrode cognomics like?
Yeah, I think you're right. Oh yeah, right. The DSI, I'm sorry. Well, DSI is what
why don't we let them answer?
Yes, that's a great point.
Because I would still love to.
Yes,
I'd love to get them to come and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Sync Pi is another project from Canby Tech. That is there too. They don't have any people. Okay. Is there a paper? I want to say there was a paper. There's an OHSU. Oh, okay. Well, there's a archive. Where's this? 2020. Okay. Nice. So let me just. That's cool because it was. I might not have seen that if it came out February 16th. But I will just check. Let me check my email and see who it was that I was talking to. Yeah, so first author Tab is who Tab Mehmet. Okay. And he does reply. It currently does run on Linux. It looks like they're using WX Python. And let's see. Ooh, clinical documentation. Wearable sensing VR 300. Okay. So I'm not 100%.
Yeah, that's the wearable sensing VR implementation. So it is wearable sensing.
Well, there's wearable there's the VR 300 that they talk about, but there's also the DSI 24, wearable
Yes.
sensing DSI 24, which I think is like, and my apologies to Cognionics for calling it Cognionics like, but maybe that's just because that was like the first company that I ever saw that has it's like a let me just drop a link and let's have a look at Manuel's question here.
Mm-hmm.
ECG features, yeah. Check interoceptive. Mika Allen is a researcher at our house, and I want to say he's got a Python package for doing ECG related stuff. And I think his Twitter is like introspection.
Well, I have a Python question as well. By the way, I'll just be back in a minute. But I've been looking for a Python package that does a real-time FFT visualization. And I know that sounds like the world's simplest thing, but almost every library that does FFT anything is static.
What's
And
the Montreal thing?
EEG notebooks?
No,
Oh, sorry.
no. I mean, EEG notebooks is, if anything, is Toronto.
Yeah, sorry.
Give me a second. Let me just find this. Let me find Mika Allen,
Sure.
because the Embodied Computation Group is the name of his. This is the name. Maybe it's under resources.
I think you actually linked me to the interoception library.
But here's their. So the reason that I like this group, well, one, he's coming from a Phil where he got a really great computational training, right? What he's trying to do, as you see with kind of like his lab name, right, is which of course the acronym is ECG, right? And is introspection, right? Or this is focused, so focusing on things like pre-processing, analyzing, and synchronizing cardiac data. Okay, that's one of his active, systole, or yeah. Here, let me. Just so let me know if that helps, Manuel. Yeah, he's maybe not. Please, yeah. Let me know if that's it, and I'd be particularly interested to know what it's missing, or like what else you'd like from it, if because like let's kick that to him or his group, and I think they would care. Yeah, just really interesting studies that they're doing, and that just got me thinking. Just because I know I know that Mika thinks about things like, are you, are you getting gut sensations, and how do those affect your cognition? And I was just thinking of the Stanford guy who's doing EGG, right? And so electrogastrograms, okay, and you know, we know you've got a bunch of gut neurons, and those gut neurons are still electrically active in a way that is detectable, and this guy is doing is developing hardware for doing this cheaply. And you know, because he's like, not a lot of, you know, there's not a lot of clinical interest in collecting EGG. um, uh, so he wants something that just works. And so anyway, when I saw his presentation, I was just like, you would seem to love NeuroTechX, because NeuroTechX is going to be interested in giving you the kind of hardware, or you know, or we want your hardware, right? Anyway, I caught a talk of Joshua Box, and if I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he got asked a question about gut neurons, and he had a very contrarian position on it. Let's just say, so he feels that we maintain all these neurons and that they are doing a job, but that job is really maintaining a particular set of microbes to produce the chemicals that we need, because your gut is producing chemical, you know, it is very much a bioreactor for your for you. And yeah, he didn't think it was symbiotic at all. He thought it was very much like the way we keep, you know, cows. And um,
That the microbes encourage. I wasn't following the relationship. Who's keeping the cow in that example? Sorry to be so explicit.
yeah. So I, you know, so I gotta say, Manuel, when he appeared on this, I thought it was a very small kind of meetup. I mean, there was maybe like 15 people in this meetup from bugout.dev, and I didn't know who he was. And but I was brought in by the title, which was AGI as a philosophical enterprise, or a philosophical project. And you know, I'm originally a philosopher. That was my first degree, um, and so I was hooked.
Right.
But he gave a talk. Yeah, and there should be a recording, and therefore at the end you can see me going like, hey, that was really interesting. It seemed like, but I was like, but it seemed to be lacking in details and implementation. I was like, and I think I said something else like, well, if you don't like ICLR, like where do you present? Like,
Right.
and his response was, why don't you check YouTube and you can maybe find some of my other interviews?
Right. This is
that was that was nice. And then I checked, and like, yeah, he's got like a 3-hour interview on Lex Fridman. I was like, okay. But it was, you know, I can you tell me, Manuel, like does he publish? I mean, it was really interesting. I wanted Simon, I don't know if Simon's still with us, but I wanted Simon to see this, only because Simon's involved in some pretty, you know, uh, um, pretty different kinds of computer science projects that involve functional languages with you know, kind of like languages designed to be different in terms of composition of functions and things like that. Okay, good, you're here. Yeah, uh Is principles of synthetic intelligence. Okay. Well, I need to do some work, and I know I said this to Simon that I caught this talk and I didn't know this guy, but it was really interesting. And yeah, he apparently knows how to come up with good titles, and so after I said I had to go because I had this interview after. I was like, I've got to go, and it's like 5 minutes to the end of the hour, and uh, but I did check, and he's got tons of interviews, and but I caught his Lex Friedman, and again it was like it was still speaking in generalities, and I was like, well, bring this down to earth in terms of what are the kinds of experiments, like, without developing AGI, you can still do experiments that at least, try and get at particular features or particular concepts that I think would be, so okay, while we've still got a 10
Well,
minutes,
to whatever
let's see.
extent I can weigh in on this topic, AI in games is something that has been a thing for a very long time because you can't always have other players, and playing against other players is a thing. The fundamental thing that, I mean, this is very obvious, but AI is good at pattern matching. So if the thing that you're doing requires matching a pattern, then machine learning can do it, deep learning can do it, and it works well. But decision making is really the part where this stuff falls down. And I'm always interested in how people are tackling the decision making aspect of it, because to me, you need some way to see the decisions. You need some way to understand the branches. You need some way to understand the decision making mechanism. And maybe that is going to be the way we understand it, and maybe it's not. But I will say that it is notable in its absence because we don't have that piece yet.
Say that last bit again. Sorry, I turned down the volume because.
Oh yeah, no, I was saying that the decision-making aspect of neural networks and machine learning classifiers still seems to be missing. Like the show
it's
me
very
your
easy
reason.
to assign a task that systems fail on. Yes.
Yeah, well, just the particular thing is, like, if you were to ask a game player to explain their decision-making logic, they would speak in these sort of conceptual terms. And what we don't have is a way that an AI can give us the same answer. So maybe that's not going to be one-to-one. Maybe we're not going to reach that point. Maybe we'll develop AI that's really good that doesn't use that method. But I still find it fascinating that you can ask a player to explain their decision-making process, and they'll give you the fundamental aspect of how they're deciding on what they're doing.
Well, certainly philosophers would say you don't necessarily have access to that information.
But you can
asking an agent, in this case, a human talking one, to describe their decision making, might still be something that they're actually recreating as opposed to accessing.
But a game is finite and known, while the brain is not. And so in real world settings, you can decide an action doesn't necessarily have a qualitative component. But within a game, every action can be rated as either correct or not, as in brings you closer.
No, I get what you're saying in terms of like there are clearer metrics,
right?
In it, and this is what we've talked about. We want to have the ability to have 20 people with EEG systems, yes, so that they are interacting in a game environment, and that game environment is giving us all the what we would normally call experimental control, but that experimental control is shared between 20 people.
Exactly.
And we can also get at how often are they killed, how often do they kill others, or I only play first person shooters, so
sure,
forgive my awful language, but you get the point. I mean, for sure.
Well, But there's this. Please.
Well, so it's interesting because I posted Joshua Box Google Scholar, and then I just sorted it by year, and he's got a 2020 paper in Journal of Artificial General Intelligence. So okay, so I'm learning something about where he is publishing. When artificial intelligence becomes general enough to understand itself. So I mean that's kind of to my point where it's just like there's always this distinction between being able to do a task and being able to understand how you yourself did that task. You know, like having access to your internal mechanism isn't
Right.
necessarily a part of any mechanism that is able to do the task.
Yes, and there's just what I'm just talking about is like the intentionality and the goal driven aspect of like, I could see that my opponent was weak, so I decided to this, or I could see that my opponent was strong and I decided to that. There isn't this sort of, what is my journey to completion? How am I going to get there? How am I going to stop my opponent from getting there? That's a narrative that almost any player can provide on a strategic enough game. But AIs don't work that way. There's no goal. There's no how am I getting closer to the goal or further from the goal. It's just more like here's a pattern, and when you see this pattern present, do this, and that's fine. But there's no intentionality there, and I don't mean to go into. But what I'm really looking for is like an AI that explains what it's trying to do.
I mean, like this sounds like exactly his area.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So I don't know MicroSci 2 or the MicroSci architecture for cognitive agents, but I want to. Can I download this? Oh, it's a chapter.
Wow, that sounds like the turbocharged version of Game of Life or something.
Well, I did used to play that board game.
Not that one. The cellular Unix thing.
There's speaking of the orthogonal research and education lab. I think there was like a paper on graph cellular automata. Anyway, it looked interesting. Okay, we're coming. We're hitting the. What is the in American football? There's like a 3 minute.
2 minute warning.
It's a 2 minute warning. Okay, we're hitting the 5 minute warning.
Yeah.
So I wanted to point out a couple things on Slack. Sounds like you talked about the Facebook thing, or
Yeah, I mentioned the Facebook thing. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Meta Reality Labs, or yeah. So what is it now? Yeah, is it Meta Reality Labs? Okay. So the Beacon Biosignals got 27 million for diagnostic EEG. And
this is what I mean. These valuations, like 20, 30 million plus acquisitions are ripping in the last month. I'm like, what's going on?
When you posted Zeto, or I'm not sure how that's necessarily pronounced, but the ZETO, I saw the, I forget if it was the VC guy or the CEO speak at QB3. I think he was talking at some like UCSF entrepreneur, interview thing. Anyway, Zeto was definitely designed to replace current clinical EEG systems for like epilepsy.
Right.
Right. So it was the idea, and it was kind of like we don't need the EEG tech anymore. Like this is just a helmet you put on.
Yeah.
We get good enough data,
Mhm.
and and you know it gets sent to the cloud or something like that. It kind of like I'm pretty sure that Neurika is trying to do the same thing. And I don't know if you saw that, but Neurika is hiring too. Neurika is hiring more people too. And so I don't know if they got a new round of funding, but uh, anyway, check job boards because I've put in maybe like 5 or 6 jobs that I've seen this week, all super cool, um, ranging from computational neuroscience through to you know health algorithms for Apple and Meta. Um, uh, and at this point, I think Apple's got a clear case for how they're doing. So like how they're certainly getting the data, um, uh, and yeah, they're doing it at scale now because they're selling enough of these watches. And I think they are the dominant wearables now, aren't they? I mean, Apple's they're always the dominant in terms of margins, right? But I think their numbers surpass everybody now.
I think so. Yeah, on the watch.
It's like there's there like it's a good thing that Google bought Fitbit because they wouldn't be competitive with Apple if they weren't a part of a. Great. Okay. Yes. Summer internships. So I posted. I try to post in student clubs, although student clubs are kind of focused on undergrads. But Utah is paying their summer interns, um, I believe, and Utah biomedical engineering is top notch. Um, uh, I always love their computational biomedicine is awesome, and they have a long history of certainly of like cutting edge chest, heart monitoring. They built it's like called the Utah Array. It's like this 1,000 electrodes chest vest of because they're
Johnny.
doing like nuts, uh, you know, yeah, high res electromagnetics, computational electromagnetics, and using big iron, um, and okay, still going to be full-time student over the summer. Okay, yeah, over the summer, Utah's. I want to say Utah's paying. I put that. Let me just check. Um, because I think you have to be an undergrad though. So, uh, um, okay. So yeah, I did. I put this in. It didn't come. So um, I don't think so, Manuel. I'm sorry to say. I think you have to. I think you have to be there, uh, but I think if you got your application in, I think you. Well, I don't know if what your limitation is, but I think they would. You we would be able to get you there if you were able to come. Uh, uh, is my point. So uh, like I said, you know, these are paid, or the reason I posted this is that you should be paid if you're going to do research work for somebody.
I will say that for whoever's interested, having discussed with an attorney extensively around internships, just because it was a topic of interest, paid internships are a lot easier for companies to do these days because of some legal changes. So that's not to say that there isn't going to be a lot of unpaid like traditionally, but um, if if you're applying for an internship for a company of any sort, I think it's reasonable to expect to get paid these days, and it's not even an altruism thing. It's like they'll do it for their own convenience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, internships should be paid.
Yes.
Or no, internships are now paid positions,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So don't let anybody tell you different.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and I'm saying even legally for the company, like they,
oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah. So that's
okay,
great.
okay, good, 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 good. Okay, maybe I'm the old man here and just
No,
used to
no, this
it.
did change. I agree with you.
Okay, and anyway, I just wanted to see if so I don't know if everybody checks neurorobotics, but I post stuff in neurorobotics because I don't want it to be necessarily, uh, drown people in papers. But just thinking about Manuel, if you're just doing EMG, or anyway, check this neurorobotic fusion of prosthetic touch, kinesthesia, and movement in bionic upper arm limbs, because I think that's the kind of stuff that Utah would dig. And even if you're not, you're probably doing one of these, even if you're not doing, bionic limb stuff. And I think that would be a great, um, yeah, like put that in your application. And and if you're going to, yeah, and I don't know anybody in, I don't know this guy, but I know the computational electromagnetics people, modeling people, and Utah is a great place, um, and it's cool to see. It's cool to see the lake as you fly in, because it's weird.
Yeah, the
It's
pilots will
funky
often call it
colors.
out on approach. Yeah, yeah, they'll.
And be prepared to get shocked, or I don't know, like whenever I'm in in Salt Lake, every time I touch a door handle I feel like I get an electric shock, and I think it has something to do with the dry air. And
The static
anyway,
buildup. Yeah, no, that's
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
wild.
it's like
I,
yeah.
I had to
And
drive from Salt Lake to like an hour out into the boonies to meet a
yeah,
client, and man, an hour out from Salt Lake, I was surprised. It
yeah,
turns quick.
yeah, yeah, I mean, well, it's yeah. So there's a lot going for it.
Yes.
You can be out on a moonscape, or you can be skiing.
Yeah, you can do it. It's not a long drive to get out of Salt Lake and do whatever you feel like doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And uh, yeah, so that's the only one. Or sorry, just to Alex's point, check the new find a jobs find a jobs database, because the database includes, and I think you can check what you're interested in, and I think internships is a field, so you can limit that
Yes, it's a
to,
it's a
yeah.
filter. Yeah, let me
and
link
and
the.
and report back and tell us if that, okay. And yeah, Alex just posted it, so check it out. And if it doesn't have a lot of internships, let us know. um, I'm trying to think what are other good ways. Well, I think might be a good question for Twitter is where, so there's the now these Twitter feeds that are set up for people to find postdoc positions and to find certainly like faculty positions, right? Is there
It's like 20. There's like 20 internships. Posted right now. Yeah, there's like 20 of them. There was 118 total, but like 100 of those are expired stuff from before. But like there's 18 active internships right now in like a variety of places.
Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, love any feedback on that in terms of how that, you know, do those look like interesting neurotech focused ones? Hopefully they are. Yes, this is a kick-ass bionic arm. and when I saw that, I was just like, holy crap. And you know, and not to just make a joke, but again, like, we're not trying to build the $6 million man, right? We're trying to build the $6,000 man, in the sense that like I want a bionic arm that crushes steel, right? but still you know, can handle an egg, play a piano, and most importantly, costs less than $6,000, right? Is what we're trying to. And yes, on Saturday, like well, it'll be Saturday really early morning on the West Coast, but it's Saturday evening in India. The CEO of the Zeus arm manufacturer, I forget the name of the company.
Yeah.
Is the speaker, is the guest for NeuroTechX India on the 20th. Is that right? 20th? Yeah. And the only reason I'm hesitating is that sometimes, you know, it's like 12 hours. So sometimes potentially it's a day apart, but I think it's evening their time. And so it's just,
yeah, I think it's 16 hours ahead roughly.
And so check out NeuroTechSF. It's India's, you can check in the Slack channel, in India Slack channel, to get info. I'm going to do that because I'm going to try and remember the company name. It begins with an A. Ether Biomedical. Yeah. So Dhruv Agrawal is speaking. I believe they're based in Poland though, because I seem to remember he was a part of a European chapter for Buzz and Review, but I could be misremembering that. Anyway, you know, again, build as the strongest bionic hand. So again, I want to be able to, you know, I want to be able to do things that Lee Majors could do. You know, not necessarily lift the car, because, you know, like, honestly, that would break your back. But you know, like, crush the door handle or something like that, you know. So we'll hopefully see that. And yeah, so 7 to 8 p.m. IST. So I want to say that's like 6 or 7 in the morning PST. Are we signing off?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we have lots of stuff to talk about next week. This was super interesting.
Was there any other big items from Slack? Well, I'd like somebody to come and talk about the new Muse S, especially if they've bought one of the new Muse S's. Let's see what else should.
Did they rev the hardware, or?
I thought they revved the hardware, because people had like two they had like 2 Muse
Oh yeah,
S's,
the
but like,
Gen 2. Holy Moses. Oh no.
yeah.
Oh, that's why it was cheap. Oh jeez. Okay, yeah, so there's now a Gen 2. Is there that's fascinating. I know some people that know some people. Let me let me check and I'll see if I can get any details on the hardware.
Okay.
That's not meant to sound vague. Like I'll just see whether I still have the connection, whether they still know someone it interacts on.
No, I mean that's cool. I mean, everybody saw that Connection got 12 million to to build out their, XR device. Um, Cognition, I guess is what they're. Yeah, I'm not seeing. Well, and then yeah.
I do. This is kind of one of those minor, not minor. Ant Neuro has this really cool Twitter post about their cap being on the Chinese space station and actually being used in an experiment. I just thought that was super cool to see the astronaut wearing this EEG cap in space, and it's the same hardware that you would use for an Ant Neuro or whatever. I just thought it was amazing because actually we looked into this. NASA really doesn't like astronauts wearing stuff on them in space. They prefer, like, one of their big requirements is remote sensing. They really want the sensor to. I guess they've got sensor overload on the astronauts already, so they don't want to add more. But I don't. I think for the Chinese space station experiment, it was just like okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So I just wanted to add these 2 PR pieces. One is on the Beacon Biosignals, and one's on BlackRock Neurotech.
yes.
So this breakthrough device designation, which we've seen with some other things, although honestly, the breakthrough designation, at least as it relates to the brain, most recently has been applied to a bunch of psychedelic companies or psychedelic compound companies. So the reason that they've been able to move forward is that they were given breakthrough designation, which allowed them to move forward to trials with less reporting and less uh, preliminary research. And mainly that was due to the fact that like people have been eating mushrooms for a long time and nobody dies. So it's basically substantially equivalent to drugs of abuse. And so super curious to see that. And again, one of the jobs that I also posted in opportunities, but will appear in the database. I send them to the NTX job boards, as well as the project manager for the computational memory lab at UPenn, and that's the same group. That's Dan Risotto's group, in which he's been a speaker on a number of neurotech things, and was part of the RAM study, which is the restoring memory, restoring active memory. So this anyway, not totally the same as this, but anyway, love to see, love seeing all this movement, in and very interested to see um, what Beacon Biosignals sold General Catalyst, which it seems to be the VC, or the money behind this, uh, which neurobiomarkers was it selling? Because again, EEG is just known for epilepsy and sleep, right? So
Yes.
what is yeah, what else is worth that kind of money? Because yeah, they said they've got a big database. So is this something that they have? Well, now that I get the name, it obviously refers to Beacon Hill, and maybe they've got access to MGH, Mass General's hospitals, which are many. Um, so I think Partners Health is the chain that owns Mass General and its associated hospital, Harvard hospitals. Maybe that's the big data set that they've got access to. Anyway, so we shall see. But I guess we're going to be off next week because it's Thanksgiving.
We can be. Why don't we decide to be off? I think
Sure.
why not? Yeah, so then we can come back the week after, which is the 2nd of December. Can be our resumption. And yeah, no, this is super cool. I agree with you. I think that's a very interesting. It's a Series A, so I'd really be interested also to see what was the total valuation and dilution, because they don't just give you, they give you a portion of a valuation. I don't know. I know you know that, but so how much equity did they?
I'm glad you know what that means.
Okay.
I don't.
Oh, okay. Series A is kind of like your first big funding round after your seed rounds. So that is a sizable Series A.
So they might have gotten like 4 million before or something, is what you're saying?
Well, you can. Spark Neuro is an interesting one because we were just talking about them. They got 15 million on like a 50 million valuation. So that's pretty good to only get about 20% of your company dilution, right? But when you get large sums, if you're in a growth industry, you'll get low multipliers, and so you'll keep a lot of your equity. But if you don't, if that's not the case, sometimes large sum deals can be really bad because you lose a ton of equity. And that Series A is going to get you to like an intermediate point, but it's not going to get you like public, or it's not going to get you done. So most of these things assume you're going to have a Series B or a Series C, or a lot more, that is going to follow on and build. So it's just, I'll bore people with investment stuff, but you want to see momentum, you want to see upward valuations, you want to have up rounds, and all these things are going to be kind of like a success trajectory, and then there's like the kiss of death trajectory, which you don't want to be on, and that's where you keep diluting your company more and more, and you never hit the good part.
Well, I definitely want to learn more about what they're what they're sitting on in terms of data. And I have to assume that they're getting access to hospital data, because I mean, where else would you be getting, no one is collecting data at scale like hospital databases. What's just interesting about that is, like, does that potentially add anything in terms of what they build it as possibly relating to, which was psychiatric? Because again, there's not necessarily a big reason to collect EEG from people with suspected psychiatric disorders. Now, maybe you, in ruling out epilepsy, you end up scanning a bunch of patients who.
Oh, they say psychiatric right in the release, by the way.
Yeah.
Their platform transforms patient with neurological, psychiatric, or sleep.
No, nobody goes to jail for putting something in a press release. So it's anyway. Would love to see more, and of course the thing to do is to see who are the actual science people involved there, see what their publication history is, and of course anybody else's previous jobs. So I'm seeing that via LinkedIn that these people have definite roots in MGH, so I've got to assume this is this is a deal to try and monetize, that hospital database. And maybe next week, or maybe online, we can talk about accessing the first data release from the Cuban dataset, which is super small right now. But again, they have EEG on a big chunk of their entire population. So
I just found myself quite hungry for a Cuban
making sure
sandwich.
we can get those into EDF form or something really, really simple. All right.
Okay, so we're not back for next week because of Thanksgiving, but we're back the week after. Thank you all for joining, and yeah, some exciting stuff. Hopefully we can do some experiments, review some more news, and Morgan in a Santa outfit. We'll see how much of this. All right. So